So, some setup stuff about myself before I get to the meat of this story. Specifically Yarmhill County, a moderately sized, mostly rural county. I'm half Native American and half Caucasian. Unfortunately, as I live in Oregon and my tribe lives elsewhere, and because of the pandemic going on right now, I haven't been able to visit my specific tribe as of yet. I'm over 18, though I don't want to disclose my own age for privacy reasons. I live with my mum, who is where I get my Caucasian from, and sister too, and my dad passed away about 2.5 years ago. We also have 3 dogs of varying size and 4 outdoor cats. In the part of Oregon that I live in, you're never even 10 minutes away from a forest, 20 from a mountaintop, and even in cities too. There's plenty of forestry just pretty much everywhere, but I live just outside of one of these towns, only a short several-minute drive away, but far enough to where light pollution doesn't heavily affect me, and I can still see the stars rather clearly. I've lived in this house since I was a kid, and though I've always gotten the creeps about this place since it's next to a giant forest, it's been a while since anything that I could categorize as paranormal happened to me. I'm also generally a pretty skeptical person and not so superstitious, if I'm being honest. I think science could explain around 95% of the world's mysteries, though I've seen some stuff that I still have no rational explanation for, I'll admit. And the things that have happened to me over the past 3 days definitely fall solidly into that category. I know a decent bit about skinwalkers. They come from the Ute and Navajo tribe legends, being witches that are the antithesis to medicine men, commonly found around the Four Corners area of the US and around Navajo reservations, but my knowledge is limited to different internet retellings of the legends, so I only know a few baseline rules. Don't fall for their imitation voices. If you smell dead, rotting meat, then you need to leave ASAP. Don't acknowledge its presence directly. Don't say its name out loud unless you want to attract one, and if you want to harm one, you'll need white ashes, like that from burnt wood. You can also burn sage if you suspect one being near you or hunting you. And if you happen to spot its true human identity, then you can say its name and accuse it of being a skinwalker to apparently kill it. How much of that is true, I am still totally unsure of, obviously, for a number of reasons too, but the largest being that I don't think any of the videos I watched were made by natives who would probably have more intimate knowledge of these creatures, but I could be talking out of my butt for sure on that one, and I don't know, it could be completely different for all I know. But also some background for this property too. According to the previous owners, who are a part of a family who have lived here for generations, there was once a log cabin built here on top of a native burial ground, which is also on a long inactive volcano. Sounds cliche, I know, but apparently it's absolutely true as far as I can tell. The burial ground part at least, and the inactive volcano part apparently is fully true as well, but I don't know. But what I do know is that there have been a number of odd, unexplainable phenomena here, which I'll try to keep short, but here it goes. So, the most notable one includes 12-foot metal doors belonging to a car paint booth being shook intensely by absolutely nothing. An old 50s metal gas oil can flying up from behind a ton of junk and flying directly at one of my dad's friends. A running sound, followed up by the mirror door in my parents' bedroom being shattered at 3 a.m. one night. And at the exact same time, my dad's best man apparently died. And needless to say that, while I haven't encountered any Bigfoot or Mothman or anything like that, I've seen some stranger things that have no logical explanation. So the property I live on is around 10 acres in size. The house is decently large with a one-car garage and office, which is where my sister is currently chilling out at, next to it, and a large metal garage around 200 yards east from the house. The smaller garage and the house have motion lights all around their perimeters for proper illumination in case anything or anyone gets near the house, but the larger garage only has like a halogen bulb outside of its main door that went out last week in fact. And now at night, that entire area of the property is just pitch black. The house has 3 doors too, 2 on a porch, 2 to the front yard and driveway, 1 to the laundry room and into the backyard. The one on the eastmost side is the living room one with 9 windows and one of the doors, a kitchen area with a view onto the porch, another living room type area, and then halfway to the bathrooms and the bedrooms too. The office in the smaller garage has 2 entrances, one heading directly into the backyard that's sliding glass, and 2 partially iron, partially glass doors that head into the garage itself. The metal garage was actually built over the aforementioned cabin and has an attic that spans over the entire length of it. It has a car lift, a paint booth that can fit a limousine, a bathroom, and also scaffolding with a heater in it, which is where apparently the gas can flew from. Around 15 feet behind the shop is a large forest that I've never stepped foot into due to there being a crazy old man living in it. While I haven't stepped into it too, my sister and her friends have headed in a few times, each time returning with odd objects too. And although they haven't gone into the forest for like several years now, I do remember them bringing out stuff like Baphomet statues, animal bones, and weird sort of rocks before. Aside from these though, the only things we see out here animal-wise are does and baby deer just passing on through our yard to get into the forest. But now for the current events. So, around 4 a.m. on Saturday night, I was preparing to go to bed out in my family living room. My room is painted black, and being the summer here, it gets ridiculously hot at day, and I don't have good AC at the moment, so I'm sleeping out in the living room. But as I was about to go to sleep, I heard the cats fighting. Something not that odd, they're mostly males and get pretty riled up from time to time, but then I heard something else. There were 3 distinct knocks on one of my front doors. This immediately freaked me out for a few reasons. For one, it's like 4 a.m. and pitch black outside, and these knocks were far too loud for an animal to make, and sounded just far too high for them either. And second, my motion tracker lights were still off. After the knocking, my dogs headed towards the other front door. This one is the partially iron one, partially glass, like those on the office, and they just completely lost their minds with barking. Something they only ever do when they see something that they don't recognize. At this, I locked all my windows, closed all the blinds, and I just sat on my couch bed. In my living room, facing out towards the front yard, there's a half-circle shaped window with no blinds that allows me to see when the motion tracker turns on or off, and I just sat there, staring at this window for about an hour and a half until they finally came on, and then the sun came up. I didn't really have the courage to go and look as to what caused the lights to trigger, but anyway, the next morning I asked my mum if she heard a knocking on the door to get a disturbing answer from her and my sister, because my mum had also heard the knocking, but also heard it on her windows to the bedroom, and my sister heard it knocking on the sliding glass door to the office too. I knew then that this was something that had knocked multiple times, as there was just no way that I could have mistaken the tapping on my door for something tapping on my sister's door. While the sun was up, my sister and I bought some sage, since from what I know it wards off skinwalkers and other things, but my mum accidentally misplaced it before we could burn it. And by the time that we realized that we couldn't find it, the shop that we went to had closed, so we had to just hope nothing worse would happen that night. But the second night was so much more disturbing than the first. While I didn't spot anything, I definitely heard a loud ambient noise coming from the woods. The nearest broad comparison that I could make is like how a city sounds at night when there's construction, but this sounded more natural in origin, in some really odd way. Another much more niche comparison would be the song Cave of the Past from Earthbound, as it's the only song that I can think of that fits the ambience. But I heard this thing for what must have been around half an hour while I walked my dogs in my front yard, and while I wanted to just stay inside and drown out my paranoia with some anime, my mum had me take out the dogs, claiming that there's nothing out there that could harm you. And this in spite of the fact that she heard the knocking the night before. As I was walking the last dog, though, I heard something from the forest to the east, and it sounded like maybe chanting. I only heard about one short sentence in some dialect that I couldn't discern, but that was all I needed to hear in order to head inside and lock everything up again. From there, I could hear the ambience, though, even inside my house, and was up again until the sun crested over the hills. One more thing, too, about this night, though, was that there was a light that refused to go out. It was one of the motion trackers on the one car garage, and each time I would look out at it, I wouldn't see anything, but yet it just stayed on all throughout the night. Anyway, finally tonight, I woke up late, as staying up until sunrise tends to do that to me, so I forgot to get the sage before I headed to work. Once I came home from work, it was already dark out, as I get off by the time the sun is setting. Around 2 a.m, I was taking out my dogs for the last time, and tonight there wasn't any ambience or chanting, and I stayed strictly to the small plot of yard directly in front of my house, but as I was once again taking out the last dog, I heard a noise to the east, and this absolutely scared me half to death. It sounded like something absolutely enormous had been knocked over or thrown down, something that was loud enough for me to hear hundreds of yards away. Immediately, too, I turned towards the noise and tugged on my dog's leash to drag them inside, keeping my back to the illuminated sections of my yard while I went in there. I've locked all my doors, my car, and all the other things that I can, and I've tried ignoring everything, but I just feel like I need some help now. These events are slowly escalating, and I only fear that tomorrow that it could bring on a full-on encounter with whatever this is. The fact that it's happened 3 nights in a row really hasn't helped with my sleeping patterns, but thankfully I finally got some sleep last night. And while I think that it could be a skinwalker maybe, I also think that it could be a wendigo. They're similar in nature, but if it was the latter though, I have a hunch that it would have made itself more known already. Whereas with a skinwalker, I think it could be trying to lure me out to the darkness of the shop. I've been trying to get a hold of a medicine man here in Oregon, but all I can find on Google is old articles, almost as if it refuses to let me find the help that I need so desperately. If anyone knows where I could find one to come and bless the house and the property, I would be elated to get this over with. These past few nights alone have been just terrible, and I would rather not have to see what I've heard described many a times for myself. Anyway, thanks for listening if you've made it this far, and any advice is very much welcomed at this point. I swear to you too that everything that I'm telling you guys is true, although I will happily admit that everything that I've speculated about may not be. I just really want some peace and quiet out here again, and if you can help with that, I would really appreciate it. So I went out to eat with a couple of friends, one of whom was up from out of state to visit. We turned off this highway onto an exit, and right around the corner, just out of sight after the turn, a white car is parked mostly in the road, with the door open. There's no hazards on, and the guy is just sitting there in the car. I got a horrible and instant realization too that it looked intentional and not a problem with this car. And so I yelled at her to reverse immediately. But then the guy gets out of his car, fist clenched, eyes bugged out of his head, stumbling and taking very strange sort of jerky steps directly towards us. She froze and started shaking, and I had to scream at her to reverse, even though cars are piling up behind us. I told her to let the cars go in front of us, to keep backing up slowly, and he ignores the other vehicles, still staring at the 2 girls in the front seat, just beelining right for us. We managed to pull up as the other vehicles are also trying to figure out what the heck is going on, and he seemed to get sort of confused by the moment of cars passing him now, and turns around and starts heading back to his vehicle. But I am positive that it was to grab some sort of a weapon or a gun or something. We managed to squeeze around and accelerate past him, and she's sobbing now. I turn around, and sure enough, he had something in his hand, but it was a little too far to see exactly what it was, and we were now out of distance, so he couldn't really reach us. But I am absolutely certain that this guy was on heavy drugs and alcohol and was having some sort of a psychotic breakdown from the looks of him. He wasn't asking for help, he wasn't trying to rob anyone. This guy just blocked traffic on a highway with the intention of probably murdering the first person that he was able to block in. I only just got home from this too, and I still have a lot of adrenaline rushing even now thinking about it, but I think I just need to try and calm myself down. So this happened to me and my mum last year, and we live in a pretty bad part of town. It's not unusual for us to encounter a couple of weirdos in our day-to-day life, but this one encounter really scared us both. We actually moved out shortly after this all happened. So, straight to the story. Me and my mum were just arriving home when we see a man standing in front of our main door, very skinny and tall, and looked like he was in his mid-40s. My mum questioned what he was doing and if he needed anything from us. He said that he was our new neighbour and that he would be living upstairs. Usually the landlord only rented the upstairs to tourists, so we thought that it was a little bit strange, but who cares, right? He said that he lost his key, though, and asked us if we had a spare. My mum told him of course we didn't, and that he would need to contact the landlord about that. He continued standing there, and we kind of had to push by him to get into our house. My mum quite assertively told him to step away, and I guess he got the hint, and then he left. A couple of days go by, and we haven't seen the man, but we have definitely been hearing him, because he'd been keeping us up basically every night. He was always knocking on the floor, like he was dropping marbles or hitting the broom on the wood or something. He would sing loudly in the middle of the night or just talk for hours and hours on end. He was either talking to himself or on the phone because we never heard anyone else's voice. But my mum is that type of person who just really doesn't put up with this type of disrespect, but she was trying hard not to start a conflict with our new neighbour. The breaking point, though, happens when he threw a big block of cement down from his balcony to our garden. My mum actually caught him doing it while one of our cats was minding its own business, just chilling on the grass. He was obviously aiming to hit him, but thankfully he ran away just in time. But my mum absolutely lost it, and she made her way upstairs. They got into a heated fight, and our front neighbours ended up having to break it up. My mum was really upset, and for a long time we didn't hear or see him. Now, for this last part, I need to just explain a little bit about how my house is built. So we have our main door, which is directed to a road, and we have a back entrance, which is where we have a small garden. The garden is surrounded by a wall as well. It's quite high, but wouldn't be completely impossible to jump over. My bedroom door goes out directly to the garden as well, and I usually leave my door cracked open so my cats can come in during the night. And based on that information, you've probably already guessed where this is going. So one night, while I'm already sound asleep, this twat jumped over our wall and creeped into my room. I actually woke up to him stroking my hair and cheek repeatedly. I slowly woke up and took a while to just kind of adjust my sight to realize that it was actually him. I screamed really loud and my mum rushed in swinging a lamp in her hand. He tried talking his way out of it, saying that he just needed our help and blah blah blah, but my mum was having none of it and continued to swing at him. He ran back out of the door and we obviously didn't run after him. My mum just went straight to the door and locked it. We called the police and right after that our landlord. He wasn't dumb enough to go back upstairs because he knew for sure that the police were going to come for him now. So we needed all the information we could get about him to tell the police. The landlord was very confused though and said that he hadn't actually rented it and had no idea what we were talking about. And when the police arrived, they confirmed that he had actually busted the door lock and had been living inside for the past 2 weeks. I didn't go upstairs, but my mum did, and she said that it smelled so bad that she almost threw up because he had basically been just living in his own filth. Also, he apparently had been in my room before because the police found one of my pajama shorts upstairs. The police told us that he had a couple of sketchy things in his possession and to be careful not to leave any doors open in case he came back. He was never caught and we never actually saw him again. My mum swore that once in a while she could still hear him upstairs mumbling. We were both very paranoid for a long time and never really felt relaxed living there again, but about 2 months later, we moved out. Over the years that passed recently, my nan's mind started to go. She started seeing things more and more. My family were all saying that she's getting dementia, which I honestly believed too. But one night we got a phone call that she was found by the police walking the streets holding a clock, and that meant that it was definitely the start of her getting dementia. She got worse and worse as the months passed and had to be put into a nursing home, which meant that we had to get all of her possessions from her house and take them to her new residence. Honestly, I hated it. I've never liked that house. It's always seemed just like someone was watching you while you were in there. While you were getting all of her stuff too, which took about 4 days. Weird things just started happening. Like boxes that were stacked, maybe 3 cardboard boxes on top of each other, the size that you would get if you got a PC. The top one would just fall. But the strange thing is that it wouldn't land next to where it should have. It was maybe 2 or 3 feet away from the other 2 boxes. This didn't happen just once, too. It happened 6 times at least. Each time the box would land facing up, and my dad, who doesn't believe in anything paranormal, just brushed it off as the box as being uneven with the stuff inside. And I was like, yeah, okay, I guess I'll just go with that. On the 3rd day of moving her stuff, we had to carry the sofa and the armchair out. So me and my dad were lifting it, and my uncle was in another room just wrapping ornaments and newspaper. And as we were getting ready to lift it, my dad's face just turned completely white, and he nodded in the direction of the armchair. And there was an imprint in it that honestly looked like someone was sitting on it and leaning on the arm part. The leather was actually moving. Not a lot, only slightly, but it was noticeable. But that was enough for my dad to just walk straight out of that house. He said that he needed some fresh air, and he went outside and we were talking about it. I was bragging like, see, I told you. Do you believe this house is messed up now? He tried to push it off as maybe just one of us had sat on it or something, and it was moving back to its original position. As we were standing outside, I was smoking and just happened to look up, and the blinds upstairs moved, like someone was watching us and then moved away. My dad didn't see it, and again just tried to say that there was a rational explanation. Now, the 4th day was the last day that I ever spent in that house, and it was the worst time of my entire life. We were in my dad's bedroom and had to move a bed and wardrobe out. My dad and uncle grabbed the wardrobe and moved it out and into the van. But then came the words that I will never forget. Hey, you stay here while we take this, okay? Put all the clothes into the bin bags, alright? I walked up those stairs like I was walking to the electric chair. I walked into my nan's room and I closed the door. I had already seen shadows and other things walk past that door over the years that I'd been there, and I didn't want to see another one, that was for sure. So I was in her room just packing her stuff away and thinking of how she won't ever remember who I am or that she's even my nan. I packed up 3 bags to the point where they were almost bursting, and I sat on the bed. And then I heard noises like someone was in the attic, moving. My stomach felt like it was turning, and my heart was beating so fast. And then I heard what sounded like talking from the next room. It wasn't loud, it was just like a whispering, but it sounded kind of normal. It's hard to explain, but it was just one voice talking, but sounded like it was having a conversation. It was a male voice for sure, and I listened to that voice for about 20 or 30 seconds, and then it just stopped. I couldn't really make out anything that it said, except for a couple of things. Like, it said that there's no point, and just leave her over there. A few weeks passed, and I had visited my nan in the nursing home. She didn't remember who I was, but I'd still say to her, "Hello, Nan, you okay today?" and stuff like that. And her response was always the same. She would always say, "Yeah, I'm okay, mate." Except this day I said, "Good morning, Nan." And she said, "Anthony, where have you been? It's late." I felt so happy knowing that she remembered my name for that one day. But as time has gone on, she's gotten a lot worse. She tells me things about that house and other things too, but I don't know if it's just because of the dementia or if it's true. Anyway, I know that this is getting a bit long. I could honestly make a list a mile long of things that me and other people have seen, heard, or felt in that house, but I'll leave it here for now. I'll end with this though. I'll never forget the vibe of that house. It was just so depressing and like you were just constantly being watched. I grew up in an old Victorian terrace house in London. All over Britain, you have streets and streets of these traditional small two-up, two-down houses that are at least 100 years old. I lived here until I was 18 and have quite a few stories, but this one is weird, even by my standards. So just quickly, I need to describe the floor plan of my old home. In the old part of the house, there was a large room at the back, which we used as a dining room, and a small room at the front, which we used as the living room. There was also a hallway that ran alongside the living from the front door to the dining room door, and to the left of this door were the stairs that led up to the small landing that separated the front bedroom and the back bedroom. At the back of the dining room was a newer extension that created a long narrow kitchen and a bathroom at the end. The house was in pretty bad condition for years, with cracks between the walls and the ceiling that you could fit your hand in, and no central heating as well. So on this day, I was hanging out with my neighbour. We were about 8 years old at the time, and she was one of those bossy, no-nonsense, never believed in Santa kind of kids. Old before her time, my mum would say. My aunt and my older cousin had come to visit, so I was taking full advantage of my mum being preoccupied with guests to keep playing with my neighbour. It must have been around 7 in the evening, I think, when my mum and my aunt ran out of cigarettes and decided to drive to the petrol station to get some more. This was the early 90s, and UK stops were pretty strict about closing at 5 PM, so the garage, which was a 10-minute drive away, was the only option. I told my mum that I wanted to stay with my neighbour, and after checking that it was okay with her mother, my mum, my aunt, and my cousin and older brother left in the car. My friend and I messed around for a bit before deciding to go into my house to get a toy. Mostly we thought that it'd be exciting to play in the house with no adults around. And I can still remember the weird sense of foreboding and expectance that I could feel while we were in there, like something was going to happen when we entered the room. The neighbour kid could also feel it too, so we decided to wait outside on the wall. As I walked through the dining room door to head out of the front door, something moved out of the corner of my eye though. I looked up the stairs and I watched as my family walked in single file across the landing from the back bedroom to the front bedroom. This obviously confused me, as I hadn't heard the car return or heard them climb the stairs, so I called out, "Hey, I didn't know you guys were back." But no one answered. So I began running up the stairs, calling out to my mum, and as I got about halfway up, my blood just instantly ran cold. I realized then that both doors were shut and had been when they walked across, and also the lights were off. And so I ran. I jumped the stairs and I ran out the front door with my neighbour right behind me. Outside, I told her about the doors being closed and how I couldn't understand why my family looked like that. I saw them clear as day though, walking in height order with my mum first and my brother last, but what had creeped me out most was just how expressionless their faces were, kind of like sleepwalkers. My neighbour then told me that she didn't actually see my family, only shadows moving across the landing, and had been too scared to move until I started running. I was honestly terrified at the time that if I'd seen their ghost, did this mean that something had happened to my family? And after an agonizing 5-minute wait, my aunt's car finally pulled up and they got out. I immediately began demanding to know why they didn't answer me when they came back before, but of course they didn't know what I was talking about. I don't know what I saw up there that day, but I'm really glad that it wasn't actually them. I moved to Denton about a year and a half ago now. I was always told too that it was a pretty safe place, and I felt the same when I lived in my first house. So when I moved to my new place about 8 months ago, I didn't think that it would be much different. Actually, I thought that it would be safer since my last place, my roommates never, and I mean never, locked the doors. In the new place, I have a roommate and a big dog, so that makes me feel safer too. We lived in a good area where there were families around and stuff, but since I've moved here, there have been 4 different instances where men have come to my house and done something really strange. All have occurred at night from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. Here's the first one. So the first one happened about a month into us living here. It was 3 a.m. and the doorbell rang. And I mean, who the hell would be at my door right now? As I'm walking to the door, I can see and hear this person trying to get in. Me, terrified, I look through the peephole and I see the silhouette of a guy that looks like my roommate's ex. They had just broken up, so I wake her up and I tell her. She opens the door a few minutes later and the guy just isn't there anymore. She peeps her head out of the door and sees that same guy inside my car. I'm a dumb person and I didn't lock it that day, so she yelled at him and he just sprinted away. The second time it was 9 p.m. and I'm home alone. Someone rings the door and my lazy ass didn't get up to get it. A couple of minutes later, the door rings again. But this time I get up and no one's at the door. I open it and I see 2 men in an SUV pulling into my driveway. They're almost all the way up to the house, and once they see me, they stop the car, put it into reverse, and leave. I don't know what they wanted or were going to do, but it was weird. Another night, my roommate is home alone. It's 9:30 p.m. and the door rings. She doesn't get it, thinking that it must be her Amazon package or something, and they'll just leave it at the door. The door rings again though, so confused, she gets up and looks through the peephole. There's a guy with a black ball cap on, and he's looking down so she can't actually see his face. She asks, "Can I help you?" "Hey, I have your Amazon package here." Okay, do I need to sign or anything?" He then says, no." "Okay, can you just leave it on the ground then?" And then he just ends up standing there for a minute or so. She nervously stares back at him through the peephole, waiting for him to walk away. He eventually does walk away, but for about an hour and a half after that, our big-ass dog keeps growling at the door. And I can attest to the fact that she has never done anything like that. Another weird thing too is that Amazon stops delivering at 9 p.m. Maybe he was just running late? Now, the last one is definitely the creepiest. This happened last month at around 1:30 a.m. and I wasn't home but my roommate was, with her boyfriend Alex. Now, they're laying in bed and from the corner of Alex's eye, he sees a pair of eyes in the crack of the blinds from her window. He gets up and runs outside and sees a grown-ass man in a construction vest looking through a window. The guy jumps when he sees Alex and grabs our trash cans right next to her window. He pretends to just be a trash dude, kindly taking our empty trash cans out for us. Didn't know that they had night shifts now, on Fridays. Trash only comes Monday and Wednesday mornings here. So yeah, we have no idea who this guy was, but he got out of there quickly. Those are my stories, and I've heard that there's a man that the DPD are looking for. He's forcing himself into women's apartments in Denton, and it's sad that I have to live in fear because I'm a target being a woman. I know that it may sound a bit dramatic to many, but after all of these experiences that I've had, can you blame me? On top of this guy that's been named a serial offender on the loose too, I'm pretty terrified to live alone next semester. I've never been scared of that, and I'm a pretty tall and heavier woman, and I've grown up with all brothers. I thought that I knew how to fight, but now I'm just like, could I help myself? I don't really know, and I'm generally a calm and collected person, but this is giving me really bad anxiety every time that I'm home alone and I hear something. Anyway, thanks for listening to my stories, and if any of you guys have experienced anything like this around here, I would love to know that I'm not alone.